Neil, thank you for joining us. Full disclosure, when we found out that you were going to be talking, we toyed around for about 5 minutes, thinking about dragging mattresses out onto the stage, and then I would interview in like a slumber party style situation.
We should have done one in bed together.
I know, we could have. Maybe that will be for the follow-up video. But excited to have you on stage. For the first question, I'm curious, just talk a little bit about the current landscape that Casper is competing in. Obviously, it's changed quite a bit since you guys launched, and I'm curious to know what are you doing to differentiate yourself in the space?
Yeah, so how many of you guys have bought a mattress ever? Everyone. So that was a key question, but going to any of the stores out there for the most part are terrible experiences, right? You have commission salespeople, products that are the same in almost every store, and they have these money-back guarantees where you get 100% of your money back, you find a cheaper product somewhere else. Well, Rick can't do that because they're made for each specific store, and so for the most part. And so you've got this terrible environment in which no one likes going to buy a mattress. And on top of that, we're seeing an interesting place in the world where a lot more people are thinking about sleep more holistically. And that's the intersection of the two of those is where Casper was born, was that both we can think about how do we create a much better experience around a mattress and products that are holistically around sleep. And then how do we create content? How do we get people thinking about and put a voice to this conversation around what would your life be like if you could sleep a little bit better? And so most of the day what we spend thinking about is end to end, how can we make this an incredible experience that's like going to buy an iPhone, right? Like you don't wake up in the morning and say, yay, let's go mattress shopping, right? But when a new iPhone comes out, people are waiting in line for hours and hours because it's a product that you want to interact with. And so whether it's the service experience and getting a delivery within a 1 hour window so you don't have to wait 6 hours for the truck to show up with 2 guys or whatever, or coming up with funny content such that you want to interact with us, we're trying to think about the end-to-end experience so that it's a brand you want to interact with.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm curious to sort of build on that a little bit. You guys obviously are thinking more broadly about the whole conversation that's happening around sleep. You have Van Winkle, a publication dedicated to sleep. I was, a few weeks ago, Casper hosted a sleep symposium, which was quite an amazing event. And you're really sort of thinking more holistically about that experience. Talk a little bit about that transition from being a mattress company to a sleep company, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah, it started with this idea of, when we first started the company, we were working together and seeing a lot of entrepreneurs that were around, and there was like a weird dynamic going on where, the entrepreneurial lifestyle is very much heralded as like, don't sleep a lot, work as much as possible, you're pumping 100-hour weeks. But in society, we're drinking green juice, we're going to SoulCycle, we're trying to be healthier. And to us, it was like sleep is this last great remaining resource, right? If you look at the iconic brands over the last couple of decades, you think about how Whole Foods created a place for us to actually, eat healthy, theoretically. How Nike reinvented the way we think about fitness. There are certain consumer movements that end up happening, and we're not the people inventing sleep, right? If you look at almost every publication in the world now is talking about sleep in a meaningful way. It's replacing sex in many ways in a lot of the columns that are out there. But if we can be the brand that puts a voice to it and says to people like, hey, instead of thinking about sleep as this like very clinical thing where you're talking about spinal alignment all the time, what if we think about it as a last remaining resource that we can optimize or at least just be cognizant of so that we can think about, instead of sleep in and of itself, what would tomorrow be like if you could sleep 10% better, right? There are very few things in the world that you can do that would dramatically change your life other than eating, sleeping, and exercising. And so we think of it as like the last remaining thing that people haven't really started to work on in their lives yet.
And how does that sort of translate into the products that you're creating? How are you educating your consumer, and what does that mean sort of going forward for you guys?
Well, for the most part, buying products in the category, there is no sleep category today, right? You buy mattresses in a furniture store, whether it's an IKEA or Sleepy's, next to bedside tables. You buy pillows at a Bed Bath & Beyond next to towels, and you're not really thinking about how these things interact with my optimal sleep environment. It's mostly around decor or furniture or price, and there's not a whole lot of thought given to human-centered design. So my partner Jeff spent 10 years at IDEO, where he had really been trained in thinking about, let's go all the way to the beginning and say, if we actually watch how people are sleeping, if we think about what are the core behaviors that end up happening and then build products on top of that, you can actually end up coming up with stuff that's completely different. So if you look at the original design for the Casper, right, we didn't have like a material in mind when we started. We went out and watched tons of people sleeping and realized there are a couple key problems. Memory foam is amazing for your back, but it sleeps really hot, and you feel like you're getting stuck in it, so it's bad for sex. And so there ends up being, tons of reasons why people, don't like sleeping on memory foam. Well, it turns out if you actually add latex to the top of it, you can create a much more breathable surface. It's a lot bouncier. It mimics the feeling of a spring bed in many ways that people are used to, but you end up getting something that is a much, much better sleep surface. And the only way you would have come up with that is that if you had said, forget about the materials that we're wedded to, we're not just a memory foam company or a spring company or whatever, you have to kind of go back and say, we're completely agnostic and we're willing to work with anything. It was the same thing with the pillow. We spent 2 years, we have a 15-person design team that had been working on this, and we'd spent 2 years almost thinking about even the concept of a pillow. Like, we built hundreds of prototypes. We built a pillow that had 100 little pillows inside of it. We used buckwheat. We used every single material out there. And unless you actually say, because like the easy thing would have been, okay, let's just take the foams that are inside of our mattress, like a lot of companies do, cut it up into a rectangular format, and then say go sleep on that, right? It turns out the anatomy of a neck and the way that your spine aligns is very different. Those same materials don't make sense for supporting your head. And so the way it translates for us is everything is around human-centered product development, starting from the very beginning. That's why we have Casper Labs. So we've got like 25,000 people that volunteer to test our products out before we launch them or help us ideate on those things as they kind of go through the pipeline. And then on the other side, it's about like almost no one needs a mattress outside of a life event and something that's happening. And so the reason we create content, the reason we want to be part of your life in other ways is so that the next time you think about it, you remember that there's a company that's always continuously innovating on these things. But most people are not in market at all times.
It's interesting, not to sort of go back to the sex thing, but just thinking about mattresses beyond sleep. Do you remember waterbeds?
Yeah. Well, not me personally.
Yes, but crazy. Anyway, sorry. I just won't go there. Anyways, the interesting, to sort of pick up on the legitimate part of what you were just saying. In many ways, you are you're a technology company. There's, like you said, you're sort of owning this end-to-end experience from that sort of innovation side all the way through to getting that product in the hands of consumers. Can you talk a little bit more about what that sort of entails or requires from building the company, so to speak?
Yeah, so I think of it as almost like we're running two separate companies. So if you look at half of our company and a lot of the part that sits here in New York, it's very much about how do we build the best possible web experience? How do we design the best content capabilities? How do we think about service design? And it's almost like as if you're building an e-commerce site, but anyone can go out there and say, like, let's go skin a page and make a website, right? To optimize it and deliver something that's really fun. And to create a relevant brand. Like if you've ever been on the subways, I'm sure you've probably seen one of our campaigns that talk about lots of ridiculous things, which are very fun. But that was an inspiration based on the idea that like, hey, riding the subway is sometimes not a pleasant experience, and these ads are designed to try to convince you to do something. What if instead we took a step back and said, how do we just give a gift to people? And then obviously they'll think our brand is interesting and hopefully they'll come check us out. But like if you tell a story, people will think about it. So that's a lot of what we think about here. And the second half of the company is really thinking about physical product design. How do we actually innovate on the fact that we have to figure out how to take this enormous thing and put it into a box and ship it sometimes 3,000 miles across the country? How do we think about coming up with generations of new products? And so it's always like a little balance, right? Because to do this well, they always say to be a game-changing company, you have to deliver a 10 times better experience, right? And so to do this well, I think you have to deliver both a much better digital experience alongside a much better actual physical experience. And so we try to have our team mimic that. And so we think about innovating in both the actual design of our products, but also in the interaction design.
And then, given the fact that the folks in the audience are agencies, brands, the sort of buzzword always, I've been doing this for 8 years, is innovation. Give me one of those innovation things. How do you sort of build that into that sort of the culture of your business? Like,
Yeah.
what is the sort of keys that you're sort of thinking about there?
I wish there were a simple answer. Honestly, I think it starts with humility. A lot of brands, when you go out there with a lot of bravado and say like, hey, we're the bomb, right? And you should listen to us. You've already created a barrier by which people now want to question you, your integrity, and other things. And I think we've always tried to take a step back and on the other side and say, if you could be quirky and fun and realize that you kind of have to be a little bit vulnerable and let people in and discover it on their own, then people, I think, will have a lot more fun and they'll enjoy your brand a lot more and they'll want to interact with you as opposed to forcing something on someone. And we try to let that live through everything that we do, right? Whether it's the fact that, like, it's our subway campaigns or our TV ads have a squirrel, which is like a symbol of like, this odd creature that wants to explore the world. The fact that we were the first people to do animated TV ads for a mattress company. That's like very weird. Normally you just see people sleeping on beds and doing whatever they may. And so I think you have to stay not just true to your core values, but actually figure out like what is it that people want to see, because usually people don't want to see your commercial, right? You're intruding on something else that they're doing, and so you have to give a gift back to them.
And obviously right now you are sort of direct to consumer only. There's so much conversation in retail and physical retail. Is that something that you're sort of considering at the moment, or?
So we already do a little bit of it. We have 2 showrooms, one in LA and one in New York. And it's amazing. I would caveat this by saying 99.5% of our customers, let's say, have never been or tried a Casper before buying it. And that's part of the reason why the 100-night trial is really important, because the idea is try it and sleep on it before you decide in 2 minutes, in a disgusting showroom that you want to sleep on it at another place. For those people that actually want to have a really fun brand interaction, like actually right next to your offices, we're at 45 Bond Street.
Yeah.
There's a really cool element around being somewhere on a Saturday and seeing 50 people in a room that are with their kids drinking mimosas, having fun, and like a completely different idea around a community experience around sleeping. And so we'll keep looking at showrooms or retail or other strategies, but with the caveat being it will always be very, very different than the traditional model that you see today. Because for us it's less about creating a place where people have to try the mattress. Like, we're super confident in it, and we've been lucky enough to now have a couple of years of research around it. But it's more about how do we create, again, in a physical setting, this idea of community around sleep.
And then I guess as we're sort of getting close to time, I'm curious how far into the sort of sleep realm you guys obviously do mattresses and now bedding and pillows. What else is on the horizon for you?
Yeah, I mean, people have asked us to make everything from, alarm clocks to, if you guys know what a heavy blanket is, a lot of people love heavy blanket. It's like this weighted blanket that you could put over you that actually like gives this calming sensation because it feels like you're being hugged all the time. I enjoy. But, to booties, to, scents, I mean, I'd say we've looked at about probably everything that you can imagine. The obvious one that people ask us about is like, why not put sensors in your mattress that would actually figure out how you're sleeping? And we do think about that a lot, but I've yet to see or figure out how do we actually improve someone's life, right? Like, wearing a tracker is important, and I think it's important to be cognizant of it. But when I wake up in the morning and I see that I've slept, 5.5 hours and got a sleep score of 15, my natural next question is, okay, but what do I do about it now, right? What are the next steps? And so we're thinking a lot about how do we actively change that environment to deliver a better sleep experience, because net, we want this to be something that's fun, that's interesting. Like, this cannot be like exercising or like, imagine when we were kids, right? Going to bed was always something that parents did as a punishment to you. And I think we have to kind of reverse the psychology around that and get people excited about sleeping and doing that in a better way. And so everything that we do will be fun and quirky and thinking about how to make this a positive experience.
Awesome. How did you sleep last night?
I got like 6 hours. It wasn't great.
Yeah.
I got to work on it.